We expect to get in about 10 questions. Each candidate will have an opportunity for an opening statement and closing statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Candidate will have 3 minutes to answer questions posed directly to him. The opponent will have 2 minutes for rebuttal, and the candidate who first had the question posed to him will have 1 minute to reply if he so chooses. Our timekeeping tonight is going to be done by Michael Hamay, who works for us at Riverhead Local and SouthOldLocal.com. And so he'll be doing that, and he'll be letting the candidates know when they have 30 seconds and 10 seconds left. I would ask that people in the audience, please remember this is a debate for political office, a very high political office, and I would ask that you accord that the respect which it deserves. I would ask that you refrain from calling out, heckling anybody, or any kind of outbursts. This is not a sporting event, it's not a circus, it's a debate. So let's conduct ourselves accordingly. And with that, we will get started. Mr. Zeldin won the coin toss and will be, he got to choose what position he would like to have for the closing statement, and so he will be closing last. That was his choice. My choice was to have the challenger in this race open up with opening statements. So with nothing further, welcome Mr. Zeldin with your opening statement. That if the candidate has to pause because of applause while he's speaking, the clock's going to continue to run. So if you do that while he's talking, you're actually going to take time away from him. So just make note of that. Thank you, Mr. Zeldin.
Well, this race presents a clear choice between a problem solver and a backbencher. My opponent's been in office for 12 years. He's introduced 4 bills that have been passed and signed into law, all renaming post offices. I've been in elected office for 4 years. I've introduced 48 bills that have been passed and signed into law. These are bills that cut taxes and fees. They consolidate licenses, protect our military families from protests and military burials. I believe our country is heading in the wrong direction, and we need to elect effective problem solvers in order to turn things around. I believe that the Obama-Pelosi-Bishop agenda is taking us on the wrong path. While I was up in Albany, I was proud to lead the fight on several fronts. Eliminating the MTA payroll tax for 80% of employers, reducing the middle-income tax rates to the lowest level in 60 years, being a co-sponsor of the strongest property tax cap in the entire country, eliminating the saltwater fishing license fee, creating the PFC Joseph Dwyer program for our veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. We need to grow our economy and create more good-paying private sector jobs, secure our borders and America's interests overseas, to fight for our veterans who fought for us. We need to repeal and replace Obamacare, and we have to stop Common Core. If you believe in the Obama-Pelosi-Bishop agenda, he's your man. If you believe it's time for a new direction, if you believe that America has better days ahead, that 12 years are enough and that it's time to term limit him, I ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 4th. Thank you.
Well, good evening to all of you. Thank you for being here. I've been in office for 12 years. Just heard my opponent say that my legislative records, I've only passed 4 bills, all 4 were post offices. One of those post offices, right here in Riverhead, named after Garfield Langley, a Medal of Honor recipient in the Vietnam War, the only Long Islander to earn the Medal of Honor in the Vietnam War. Another one of those post offices is named for Lieutenant Michael Murphy, the only Long Islander thus far to earn the Medal of Honor in Afghanistan or Iraq. So I think those pieces of legislation are pretty important. I know they're important to the memory of those two soldiers, and I know they're important to the families who lost loved ones. I would ask my opponent not to speak so disparagingly of that. I would also suggest that that is not a way to judge one's legislative effectiveness. I'm very proud of my legislative record. I have taken a central role in writing two pieces of legislation that have made it dramatically easier for students to afford higher education. There are 18 colleges on Long Island. You want to create jobs on Long Island? One of the ways we do that is by building in college enrollment, because it's one of the largest employers on Long Island. And the two bills that I helped write and passed into law are bills that make it easier for students to go to college, make it more affordable for them to go, and we were able to do it without any new demand on the Treasury because of the way we changed the student loan programs. I've also taken a lead in veterans legislation. Just this week, the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America listed my bill, a bill that would create a registry, would create 3 centers of excellence for the study of toxic burn pit exposure, one of the great scourges of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Is one of their top 5 legislative priorities. So I'm proud of my record as a legislator, I'm proud of my record and my office's record in terms of providing community service, and I am proud of the work that I've done over the 12 years I've been in office. Thank you.
Mr. Zeldin, the first question will be for you. You've spoken a lot about the need to secure our nation's borders. How can we secure our borders? What steps can be taken to do so? And very importantly, how much will it cost and how do we pay for it? Please be specific.
So we have all read the stories of the unaccompanied immigrant children surging across our southern border. There is definitely a clear difference of opinion between my opponent and I as to what to do about it. I believe that we need to detain these children humanely and expeditiously reunite them with their parents back home. We are sending a message right now to parents in Central and Southern American countries that if they turn their kids over to coyotes, and once they get here to America, that they will be granted amnesty. This is the wrong message to be sending. They should not even be turning over their kids in the first place for this dangerous mission where they're suffering from emotional and physical abuse on the way. I have a tremendous amount of compassion for every child in this entire world who's suffering from oppression and poverty. But we do not have the bandwidth as a nation to open up our borders to let anyone come here. We don't have the bandwidth to do it, despite all of our compassion. This is a great sign of all the dysfunction that's in Washington. In July, the President issued his proposal. The Senate Democrats had their proposal. The House Republicans put out their proposal. And then they all went back to campaign in August. The President went to Martha's Vineyard. Congress went to campaign. And then they all come back in September. Now, a functional Congress would be passing a compromise legislation. Whether it is the need, obviously, to have the resources for our Border Patrol agents to get off babysitting duty and actually do the job that they are trained to do, to have improved technology at our borders so that the judges across this country with the ability to help reduce the backlog can contribute from all across America. We need to change our policy that is sending that message. It was a presidential executive order and statements that have sent a clear message that once you come here that you will be able to stay. The cost could be anywhere between $600 million or so if you're looking at some of the proposals coming out of the House, $2.5 billion if you're looking at the proposal coming out of the Senate, about $3.5 billion if you look at the proposal that's coming out of the White House. So that compromise could be anywhere between those three. Now, I believe that you can be liberal, moderate, or conservative and be reasonable and rational. Republicans and Democrats, when they share power, have to be willing to sit down at a table to try to find common ground to move our nation forward. There isn't any one solution to be able to better secure our borders. I am all for legal immigration, but we do not have the ability here on Long Island for all of these children to be coming into our schools, especially without their parents, and the need to provide them health care and other incentives in order to sustain themselves. So I think that we should look at the proposal that came out of the House. But you know, I'm certainly willing to approach it with an open mind with all parties.
Again, folks, I would ask that you please refrain from calling out when one of the candidates is speaking. Thank you. Mr. Bishop, you have 2 minutes to respond.
First off, I understood the question to be more broadly phrased than the issue of the immigrant children, the refugee children at the border. Let me talk about what we have done to secure our border in the 12 years that I've been in Congress. We have doubled the number of border protection agents. We have doubled the budget for customs and immigration enforcement. We have built several hundred miles of fence. We've spent billions in providing technological means of monitoring the border, and we have succeeded in reducing the number of people who try to gain entry illegally. We've gone from about 1.5 million people per year who try to gain entry illegally to about 500,000. That's real progress. We obviously have a ways to go, and we have to keep working at it. But I hear my opponent talk about how members of Congress should be willing to get together, sit down, and compromise. That's exactly what's happened on immigration reform in the Senate. 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats wrote an immigration reform bill. It passed the Senate with 68 votes, and my opponent says he would vote against it. So if he's such a big fan of compromise, and we had 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats compromise, and then 68 Republicans and Democrats joined in that compromise to pass it, I don't think we need empty rhetoric. What we need is someone who really is going to engage and try to solve a problem and not stick to some ideological position that makes the problem unsolvable. With respect to what happened at the end of July, what happened at the end of July was an unqualified or an absolute embarrassment for the Congress. The Senate walked off the field. The House walked off the field. The House passed a bill purely for optical reasons of $400 and some million. It didn't come close to dealing with any part of the issue of the refugee children at the border. We do need to sit down, we do need to solve it, but we have to do it in a way that avoids the political posturing.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Zeldin? You have 1 minute.
I understood the question, and the debate in July was a border security bill. The President put out his plan for border security, the Senate put out their plan, and the House put out their plan. I perfectly understood the question. The last debate that we were at, the incumbents referred to the Senate bill as the only way. So to lecture people who are not in favor of the Senate bill and say that we have a need to compromise, this is exactly what's wrong with Washington. The only version of compromise for so many, including the President, is for them to get it 100% their way all of the time. And you have Republicans in Congress. Their only version of compromise is for them to get it 100% their way all the time, in both parties. So coming here and lecturing me as far as not understanding the question and not being on board with your proposal as the only way, it contradicts itself. And you know what? I'm not here to blame Republicans or Democrats. There's plenty of blame to go around to all of them. And that's not why we're running for office.
Next question on the same subject of immigration from Mr. Bishop. There are an estimated 11 million illegal immigrants living in the U.S. You have supported creating a path to citizenship for them. What would that path be? How would it work? And what would it cost?
The path to citizenship that I support is a path that is included in the compromise bill to which I referred a few moments ago, the bill that passed the Senate by a vote of 68 to 32. It is a path that would give each of the 11 or 12 or 14 million people who are here now without proper documentation, would give them a status so that they would not be subject to deportation. They would be allowed to work, but if they did work, they would be on legitimate payrolls, not working off the books, which they currently do. And then over a 15-year period, they would pay fines twice, They would pay back taxes twice, they would learn English, they would learn civics, and they would have to maintain an otherwise clean record. If at the end of those 15 years, they would then be granted citizenship. Now that's the compromise. Not everybody getting 100%, because by the very definition of compromise, it means people aren't getting 100% of what they want. That's the compromise that John McCain signed on to, and Lindsey Graham signed on to, and Mark Rubio signed on to, and Chuck Schumer signed on to, and 3 other Dems and 1 other Republican. That's the compromise that I support. Now, what does comprehensive immigration cost? Comprehensive immigration reform cost? The Congressional Budget Office, which is the nonpartisan scorekeeper of what the Congress does, has estimated that in the first 10 years of comprehensive immigration reform, we would reduce our deficit by $200 billion. And in the second 10 years, we would reduce it by $700 billion. So that's $900 billion over 20 years of deficit reduction. Where does this deficit reduction come from? It comes from people paying into the system that we all pay into. It comes from people being on legitimate payrolls as opposed to being in the underground economy the way they are now, paying FICA and paying Medicare taxes and paying income taxes. That's where it comes from. Now, is this a perfect solution? No, it is not. But is it a compromise that can pass the House of Representatives if the Speaker would ever allow it to come to the House? Yes, it would. And now here's the challenge. He talks about how Republicans and Democrats are equally at fault. He talks about gridlock. Here's the challenge. It passed the Senate. The Speaker, within days of it passing the Senate, announced the bill to be dead on arrival. He then said, we're going to break it up into smaller bills. We don't like big bills. We're going to do smaller bills. Guess what? That was 21 months ago. No smaller bills. So he hasn't addressed it at all. He then put out a set of principles that would guide Republicans' efforts on comprehensive immigration reform, and then 2 days later he was forced to withdraw the principles because he had a revolt on the far, far right. We need a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, wait, sorry, 2 minutes. I got ahead of myself. He gets a minute after.
With regards to the Senate proposal, we take an oath to defend the Constitution. We have 2 separate houses. Something that might be good to pass the Senate doesn't mean that is the only way. There are close to 400 different bills that were passed the House. They're sitting on Harry Reid's desk. I'm all for legal immigration. I do not support amnesty. I do not support giving citizenship to people who are not here in the country legally. Now we have, on the North Fork, we have seasonal labor. They come every summer, they want to pay taxes, they go back home. The employers are suffering with the bureaucracy of trying to get permission in time to get their labor here. Same thing on the South Fork in the hospitality industry. We need to utilize our legal immigration process. Every nation's backbone is its rule of law. We also have students who come here to this country. We educate them. They get master's degrees, graduate degrees. Employers want to hire them. There are ways that we can utilize our legal immigration process to create opportunities there. I do not believe that this Congress, which is failing to get so much accomplished on so many different fronts, I don't understand why this one proposal to try to solve 300 different aspects of immigration has to be the only way. The first step is securing our borders. When you have a leak, the first thing you do is you turn off the faucet, you don't grab a mop. There is no way that we could possibly solve any of our challenges related to illegal immigration if we do not take it seriously the need to secure our borders first. President Reagan tried this 30 years ago. And his effort, critics said that if we did this, the illegal immigration problem may actually multiply, and that's exactly what happened. So any of these proposals, we should not be jumping the gun by doing all these other things before you actually secure our borders.
The first section of the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill to which I've been referring is very stiff additional border protection provisions. Everyone agrees that we can't move forward on any of the other pieces of comprehensive immigration reform, internal enforcement, visa reform, path to earned legalization, until we secure the borders and we're all comfortable with that. That's one of the principles of the comprehensive bill that I support. So it's a red herring to say that we're not securing the borders or not interested in securing the borders. The other thing I would say is we got to live in the real world. Here's the real world on Long Island. 50% of the farm work that's done on Long Island is done by undocumented immigrants. If you ask any farmer on Long Island what their biggest problem is, most of them will tell you finding a workforce. And they're now paying $15, $18, $20 an hour, and they still have a hard time finding that workforce. And I'll guarantee you, farmers aren't waking up every morning saying, how do I get to break the law today? What they're waking up every morning to say is, how do I bring in my crop? We've got to deal with this issue, and this is the best way to do it.
Thank you. If I might, I would like your thoughts, each of you, for, say, 1 minute on a quick follow-up question. And that is, what do we do with the 11 million illegal immigrants who are already here? How do we deal with that, if you would?
Well, for everyone who is here, the ability to pay taxes, to contribute. There are a lot of individuals that are going through education process. They're getting free health care. They're getting other government benefits. They say that they are paying taxes. There are many different ways to pay taxes. There are more ways. You have employers that are bringing this workforce on, and they are unable to compete with. I mean, you're a landscaper and you're hiring an immigrant workforce that is not here legally. You're trying to compete with someone else who is following the rules, and the landscaper who's following the rules ends up going out of business because they're charging $5 more a cut. I think that one of the keys is bringing them out of the shadows so that they have the ability to pay for some of the benefits that they are receiving. But to go to the extent of granting them citizenship, I cannot support that.
What we do with them is what the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill suggests we do. We put them on a 15-year path to earn citizenship. Now, when we were at the Newsday endorsement interview last week, my opponent and I agreed. That's right, we agreed. We agreed that deportation was not the answer. Now, the only other choice, if you don't do deportation and you don't do a path to earned legalization, is what's called attrition, what Mitt Romney talked about making it so miserable that people would leave. That doesn't work either. It's been tried. In several states across the country, it hasn't worked. I believe that the most workable, the most enforceable, and the most humane way to deal with a problem that has no easy solutions is to put people on a path to earned legalization, and that's precisely what this bill does, and that's why I support it.
The next question is for Mr. Zeldin. Mr. Zeldin, in the news of late is a very scary topic, that of Ebola. And there's been a lot of debate and discussion about what we could do to protect the populace in America from that virus. Do you favor banning travel to the U.S. from countries that are known Ebola hotspots? And if not, then how can we best protect ourselves from infected people entering the United States?
Well, first off, because we don't get rebuttals back and forth, I do support deportation, but just because, I don't want to get into the long answer on that here, but the question was with regards to all 12 million people, or what's the best answer. But I appreciate your characterization of what I said there. With regards to Ebola, this is a very serious concern. We lost, patient 0, who actually came to this country. He's not even a U.S. citizen. He doctored his paperwork. He got through the airport. He has infected others with Ebola. We should not be allowing direct travel straight from these countries to the U.S. If we are going to continue direct travel, we need to drastically improve our screening procedures at the airport. No one should ever be leaving an American airport, especially if they're traveling directly from one of these countries. They're leaving without a thorough medical screening. So I think that we need to, I would actually do the former that I suggested in actually stopping the direct travel. But if we're not going to do that, we need to improve the screening. Someone shouldn't be able to get through just by lying on a piece of paper, especially when we're dealing with, in some cases, of folks who aren't even U.S. citizens. We have some very real security threats right now facing this country. Ebola is one from a standpoint regarding our health. There are other security threats. The last question was about immigration. You could ask another question about ISIS, but there are many ways that we can improve our homeland security through more robust efforts at the airport from folks who are traveling here to the U.S.
I don't think I'll need 2 minutes. Basically, I agree with Lee. I think that to the extent that we have the screening in place that we currently have, I think we should ban travel from West African countries until we are at a point where we believe the screening that's done as they're leaving the West African country and as they're arriving in our country is at the highest possible level and is essentially foolproof. But until we get to that point, and we may never, my view is that we should also ban travel.
Opportunity for a reply? Mr. Zeldin? 1 minute? No? Okay. The next question is for Mr. Bishop. Like so many other Americans, I've learned the hard way that I can't keep my health insurance policy. In fact, I've learned I must pay a premium that's 35% higher for less coverage. Many Americans, myself included, believe health care reform must be reformed. Do you agree or disagree? And if you disagree, why? If you agree, as a legislator, what do you propose to do to fix it?
I'm going to repeat what I said in Hampton Bays last week, 2 weeks ago. I believe that the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare as you call it, is a work in progress. I believe that we are going through transitional difficulties, and I believe that, that there are elements of the law that are very, very good, and we should keep them, and there are elements of the law that are not working and we need to fix. Now the challenge that we have is that in any other mature legislative body, and I will say to you that the House of Representatives under Tea Party control is not a mature legislative body.
Please, folks. Mr. Zeldin, I would ask, and maybe they will listen to you, they won't listen to me. Can you please ask them to not do that? Sir?
This is America.
You know, he's the only one getting heckled here so far. So please, folks, please. Interesting that comes on the note of maturity. Go on.
We are mature, and he's attacking the Tea Party, and the Tea Party is not in control.
Folks.
He is not in control of the
You're
Senate.
going to have to
Other
leave if
Republicans
you're not
are.
going to be quiet. Okay?
I will be quiet.
Speaking over there.
I will be quiet. I just don't want to listen to a statement saying that the Tea Party is in control of the Senate.
He's got the podium, you do
Okay.
not. So
Fine.
That's a problem for you. You're going to have to leave the room.
I'll stop speaking
Bishop.
now.
Please,
I will.
please.
Shut up. You don't have to keep saying please. I shut my mouth. I'm not speaking anymore. Continue.
Mr. Bishop.
May I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. In any other mature legislative body, we would set about the task of fixing those things that are wrong. Medicare was passed in 1964 and 1965. We're still modifying it. We're still adjusting. Because Medicare, even though it was hugely unpopular when it was first passed, and even though people said that it was going to bring socialized medicine and it was going to end the practice of medicine as we know it in this country, now people recognize that we would not be able to deliver anything approaching adequate health care to people over the age of 65 without Medicare. So people support it and they want to see to it that it works. The Affordable Care Act has elements of it that need to be fixed. We have to deal with the issue of the sole proprietor of businesses, which I think is the issue that is being referred to here. There's elements of the law that penalize sole proprietors. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows what the fix should be. We should fix it. But again, all we're doing in the House of Representatives is 52 times we've passed, I've voted against them all 52 times, passed legislation that would totally repeal Obamacare. Now, first off, we get it. 52 times, you don't want to have it, fine, I get it. But let's see what's happened in 4 years. In 4 years, the first bill that passed the House of Representatives under Republican control was H.R. 1, repeal and replace. Repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with something. 4 years later, not a single hearing on a single bill to replace it. So if you've got a plan that's going to insure 13 million Americans, that's going to keep kids on their parents' policies, that's going to do away with the problem of pre-existing conditions, that's going to save seniors $11.5 billion on their prescription drug costs, that's going to help hospitals to the tune of $5.7 billion. You got a plan for that? I'm all ears. Let's hear it. But don't just say we're going to repeal it and not have anything to replace it with.
So, I mean, the incumbent and I have a disagreement on this one. I believe that we do need to repeal and replace Obamacare. It has led to higher deductibles, higher premiums, lost doctors, canceled policies, longer wait times, hospitals getting monopolies, less insurance networks here. There are many different proposals as far as how different ways you could replace it. Tom Price has a proposal in the House. Ted Poe has a proposal in the House. Tom Coburn has a proposal in the Senate. I support allowing children to be able to stay on their parents' policies, to allow people who have pre-existing conditions to be able to gain coverage. We need to get people off of Medicaid as opposed to more people on Medicaid. You have to, for folks who are struggling to make ends meet, to have the ability to have private choice, to get the right policy to fit their family so that they can go back to work. Because some people on Medicaid are not going into the workforce because they're risking losing their Medicaid coverage. Some of these proposals also look at reforming parts of the tax code to allow people who are struggling to make ends meet to be able to afford to buy a policy. We need to allow the portability of policies across state lines to allow small businesses to be able to pool policies to save money. So I keep talking about the same alternatives, but I haven't quite gotten through to the incumbent that there are many other proposals out there. These are all ideas that I'm sharing. There are many more ideas. The incumbent said in 2010, referring to Obamacare, that there's nothing not to like about it. And I would argue that the implementation has been horrendous. It hasn't even fully kicked in yet. People are going to get converted from full-time to part-time, 40 hours a week to 30 hours a week, losing jobs. It's just a bad thing that does need to get repealed and replaced.
You know, it may come as a surprise to you, Lee, but I really do listen to what you say. I know about the Price bill. I know about the Coburn bill. I know about the Poe bill. Where are they? Where are they? Speaker of the House, a Republican, controls every single thing that happens in the House. He controls what bills go to committee. He controls what comes out of committee. He controls what goes to the floor. 4 years. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So if you have an alternative that the Republicans can coalesce around, please bring it to the floor. Let's look at it. Let's assess it. Let's have the CBO score it. It has not happened. With respect to one other thing that he said, the number of insurance companies that are going to join the networks for 2015 is up by 25%. That means that there will be more choice. That means that there will be more competition. That means that there will be more transparency. That means that networks can grow. This is the very heart of what conservatives consider to be an economic principle. Free competition in the open market. That's what's happening in healthcare now.
That's time, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you.
Mr. Zeldin, the next question is for you, and it concerns the controversial Common Core curriculum. I was going to ask you support it, but you said in your opening statement you do not. I'd like to hear your reasons in detail why not, and what role should Congress take to reform it or change it?
I support higher standards. I don't believe that Common Core is the answer. I wrote the legislation up in Albany to stop Common Core in New York State. We had about a dozen co-sponsors, both Republicans and Democrats. You have standards that are created on a national level, tests that are created at a state level, curriculum set at local school districts, and nobody's talking to each other. You have a tone-deaf commissioner right now at the state education department. You have teachers teaching to the tests, but not even teaching to the right tests because they don't know what the tests are going to look like. The state education department isn't putting the stuff out. These standards that are national are not age appropriate. If you're a 6-year-old and you're in first grade English language arts, early world civilizations, you're learning about ancient world Mesopotamia and the strategic advantage of the Tigris and Euphrates River with regards to the development of the city of Babylon. Great lessons, but I would say maybe not for a 6-year-old. We also have special ed students who are taking tests. They are being set up to fail. If you're 10 years old, but you are at a 2nd grade reading level, to be forced to take a 5th grade test is wrong. We are throwing our kids into the deep end without a life jacket, and it's a bad idea. Now, Congress helped provide hundreds of millions of dollars to help fund the consortiums to launch this. The incumbent and other congressmen from throughout New York State all signed as part of New York State's waiver to implement Common Core, because Common Core would not have been implemented on its own on its merits. Instead, you have to dangle carrots. The federal government has to give the states money. There were states signing on to the Common Core standards before there were even Common Core standards. The federal government has played a huge role in this. The state has played a huge role in this. The implementation of it has been absolutely horrendous. But Congress needs to do more, because in many respects, many states are afraid to pull out of Common Core because they believe that the federal government is going to take away $700 million from New York State, which I believe is not true. But the federal government needs to reassure New York State that you can get out of Common Core. I believe in higher standards, but this is not the way to do it.
My opponent may have set the indoor record for the most misstatements of fact in a 3-minute answer just now. Let me say a couple things. First, if there's anything that can make the Affordable Care Act rollout look good, it's Common Core rollout in the state of New York. It's been atrocious. And that's on the state. It's not on the federal government, it's on the state. Common Core needs to be fixed, but Common Core should not be thrown out. Let me give you a couple of things. First off, he talks about the role that Congress played. Congress did not play a role. Congress funded something called Race to the Top, which 19 states have received. 44 states have adopted Common Core standards. So to suggest that Race to the Top was the bribe that got states to accept Common Core is belied by the facts. Because 44 states have adopted Common Core, only 19 of them got money. There are 6 states that got No Child Left Behind waivers without adopting Common Core. So again, there is no federal mandate that states accept Common Core either to get Race to the Top money or to get No Child Left Behind waivers. I respect my opponent's passion on this issue, I really do. What I don't understand is, since he feels so strongly about it, why he's walking off the field. The fight on Common Core is in the states. It's not in the Congress. The state of New York, the regions of the state of New York adopted Common Core. The Congress has no authority over the regions of the state of New York. The state education department is the element that implemented Common Core, and as I said, they did an atrocious job. It was originally developed by the National Governors Association, that's states. It was also developed by the Council of Chief State School Officers, that's states. Now, I know he wants to put it onto the federal government, because I know he wants to make it an issue in this campaign, because he thinks it's a wedge issue, but he's walking off the field by thinking that he can affect it
It's
in the
time, Mr.
Congress.
Bishop.
With all due respect, if I ever come up here to suggest that anything that the incumbent says being filled with misstatements, I promise you I will explain what all those misstatements are. I know for a fact, being up in Albany, that there are people who do not support Common Core, who are concerned that the federal government is going to take away $700 million from the state of New York. And it's in print, you know, media has spoken about it in their coverage of it. The Congress has played a role. You personally signed the letter for New York State to be able to get the money in return for implementing Common Core. You're saying that Congress has no role, the federal government has no role. You personally signed the application.
And it's regarding helicopter noise on the North Fork. People, as you know, on the North Fork have been complaining about increased helicopter traffic and noise for years now. You and Senator Schumer recently came out in support of a route that would require helicopters to stay over water on their way to East Hampton Airport by flying east around Orient Point and across the bay to East Hampton's airport. Forgive me, but over the years there's been a lot of talk and not a lot of relief for a whole lot of people. In fact, for some people on the North Fork, it's gotten markedly worse. Isn't there anything that can be done to resolve this once and for all?
I'm just going to follow up on something that was just said. I signed a letter along with every other member of Congress in New York State, every Republican, every Democrat, at the request of the governor to support the Race to the Top application. There were 95 letters submitted for support of Race to the Top application. So to support that, I suggest
I would just ask that, Mr. Bishop, that you respond to the question.
I will respond to the helicopter question. Senator Schumer and I have been working on this for a long time. We first tried to get the helicopter pilots to follow a route voluntarily. Some did, some didn't. At the time that we did that, the FAA did not regulate helicopter traffic. Senator Schumer and I stayed on it. We pressed the FAA, and they took the position that they could regulate helicopter traffic. We actually found a provision in the FAA regulations that gave them that authority. So we asked them to put in place what's called the northern route that would bring traffic a mile offshore along the North Shore, have them routed around Orient Point and then come to East Hampton that way so that they would stay over water for the greatest extent possible. They put in place a North Shore route that didn't include the route around Northport, and they allowed the pilots to transition off their flight path at their discretion. And what they primarily do is they use the Mattatuck Inlet as a visual marker, and so they transition over there. Senator Schumer and I went back to them this past summer and asked them again to regulate it so that it would go around Orient Point. Again, they would not do so. I joined 32 or 33 other elected officials. I see Sean Walter in the back. Sean and I signed this letter that asked that they put in place a southern route so that there would also be routing of helicopters along the Atlantic coast. They would come in over Georgia Pond, and then they would again land at East Hampton, but over water to the greatest extent possible. They have not granted that yet. Now, the solution here lies with some modification to the routes that the FAA has promised us that they are working on. They've heard us. They know how severe the problem is. But it also rests with East Hampton. East Hampton loses some of the assurances, or is free of some of the assurances that they've given to the FAA over the last several years. And starting on January 1st, 2015, they will be empowered to make more decisions regarding the operation of their airport. What flights they allow, how many they allow, what times that they allow, and they will be able to regulate traffic in and out of the airport in a way that right now they don't have the capacity to do. So I believe that a combination of the North Shore route, extended around Orient, the South Shore route, bringing them in over Georgia Pond, and modifications to what East Hampton can do to their airport, and they're on board with this, will ultimately give us a situation that is much better than the one we have now.
there's an FAA loophole that allows helicopter pilots to fly over land as opposed to going around land? The answer is to close the loophole. It's that simple. One of my pet peeves about people when they're running for office is that they come before you, they tell you that if I'm elected, this is what I will do. And then they come back 2 years later with their best excuse as to why nothing got done, but they say, if you elect me again, you give me another 2 years, I'll get it done next time. This is an issue that gets worse and worse and worse every single year, every term that the incumbent has been in office. The FAA is allowing these pilots to cross over land. Close the loophole. There's a need for our district to have new leadership and a stronger voice representing us. Whether it is the issue of helicopter noise, or the fact that everyone else seems to be getting their Sandy recovery money for their barrier beaches, except for the Fire Island to Montauk Point plan, and the $700 million that folks are waiting for the first dime to show up. There are so many issues, local important issues, like studying coastal erosion issues, for example, on the North Fork, and why the study, when we were here 6 years ago running against each other, a study was released, and now the scope is greatly reduced. So the answer is very simple. Close the loophole.
If the loophole existed, we'd close it. There is no loophole. I don't know what he's talking about. FAA, there is no loophole, folks. The FAA regulates helicopter traffic. They determine routes, and the first time that they've ever regulated helicopter traffic is the North Shore route. Prior to that, there was no regulation of helicopter traffic. It was the Wild Wild West. They could do whatever they wanted. So we've made some progress, and we've solved some of the problems for all of Long Island. We still need to deal with the Eastern Long Island problem we're trying to solve. With respect to Sandy, he knows that the reason there's no sand going on the beach right now at Smith Point Park is because the Audubon Society of New York stepped in, got a temporary restraining order to block the project that had been approved by every level of government and every stakeholder, and that today that TRO was extended till December. So it's disingenuous of him to suggest that there's no sand going on the beach at Smith Point Park because of me. There's no sand going on the beach at Smith Point Park because of the Audubon Society and the federal judge.
That's time, Mr. Chair. Okay, the next question is for Mr. Zeldin, and it concerns partisanship and divisiveness in Congress. You criticize Congress for partisanship and the inability of members of Congress to cross the aisle and work together. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But your campaign attack ads don't in any way indicate you will offer anything different. If you're elected, how will you work with Democrats in the House to get things done, such as pass a budget, something you note hasn't happened since 2007?
This kind of feels like my Candy Crowley moment. I don't know if you've seen my ads, but they're actually 100% positive. So my ad is simply talking about my opposition to Common Core, my support for equal pay for equal work. But you know what? There are a lot of ads that are out there. One, for example, criticizes the incumbent for support of Obamacare and its impact on small businesses, with two small business owners complaining about the impact on them as employers. The other one is the new ad that came out yesterday that's criticizing his policies related to taxes and higher costs. But you know, to suggest that while we're here, because we have 3 minutes, my opponent is trying to scare seniors to vote for him by telling them that I want to privatize their Social Security, even though that is 100% untrue. He's trying to scare women into voting for him by saying that I want to get rid of common forms of birth control, that I want women to be paying more than men for their health coverage. He says that I want taxpayers to be responsible for corporate pollution. All these things are 100% untrue. Just like his ads where he said that I want to reduce taxes on the wealthy and increase the tax burden on the middle class. Another thing that is untrue. So I think it's a lot of, you could have a debate of substance, of a difference of opinion. Like, for example, we disagree on Obamacare. That is a nature of one of the attack ads that you're seeing from an outside group. He supports it, I don't. But specifically with regards to our TV ads, we have been 100% positive throughout this entire campaign, just so that we can avoid this moment of someone suggesting while moderating a debate that, to try to put me on defense. I'm not going to apologize for my TV ad. I love my ad. It's showing the voters of the 1st Congressional District, my family. I love my family. That's part of who I am. It mentions my service in the military, which I'm very proud of. It mentions my opposition to Common Core, because I'm very concerned about my daughters and the quality education for their generation, and my support for equal pay for equal work, so that women have the opportunity, because my opponent also says that I'm against equal pay for equal work, even though I voted for it twice. So I think it's very important as we go through these campaigns, for anyone out there who ever sees any type of an ad, whether it's on TV or radio or mail, is that you contact the campaign and find out what's true and what's not true. Like in our primary where they said, I voted to create Obamacare, even though I didn't vote to create Obamacare. Or I voted for over 100 tax increases, even though I never voted for one. So, I just think that it's just unfortunate that I'm stuck here trying to defend myself when I had a positive ad go up.
Well, fair enough. If I might just respond to that, Mr. Zeldin, and I'm sorry. I was clearly talking about the various attack ads from other people, the other groups, the Republican National Committee or the Republican Congressional Majority Committee. I get them in my email every day, and it's more of the same. So it's not. My point isn't that it's not one-sided at all. The vitriol is on both sides, and it's a constant fever pitch. And maybe some of the folks in the room notwithstanding who are very clearly in one camp or another, but the average resident looks at all of that and just feels sort of disgust. It's like more of the same every campaign. So that's all, and I apologize for ascribing those to you. I don't know, you'll have to explain to me what a Candy Crowley moment is, because I don't know. When we're done. So.
The question was about partisanship and divisiveness in Washington, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
It was. It was about partisanship and divisiveness, and how are you going to work with the other side?
Okay, well, I have a long history of working with the other side. And I'll just give you an example. This Congress has passed, I think, 26 bills of substance. One of those bills was a bill that I was one of 4 people to write. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, called the Water Resources Development Act. Governs our policy with respect to shoreline protection, beaches, inland waterways, deep water ports, and so on. Now, we spent the summer of 13, we 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, in a room doing something that's now a lost art in Washington. We actually legislate. We actually compromise. Sorry to use a 4-letter word in polite company, because that's what compromise has become in Washington under Tea Party control. And
Stop it.
I'm speaking the truth.
Please, ma'am.
I'm giving you the truth.
Ma'am, please.
Excuse me?
You're a liar.
That is enough. That's enough.
Have a nice night.
All right.
Innocent babies on your hand, buddy.
All right,
God
sir.
will judge you.
Sir, will you please leave the room?
Sure.
Thank you. I don't know what you think you're proving with stuff like this. I really don't.
How much time do I have?
I don't know. I usually time here.
I have 20 seconds.
40
seconds. So we passed that bill with very few dissenting votes. And we did it because we were willing to compromise, we were willing to listen to one another, and we trusted one another. All of those things are lost arts in Washington. The way to fix Washington is for individual members to commit to be willing to work with one another. And that's something that I have done in the 12 years that I've been there. Almost every bill that I've ever offered for filing has been co-sponsored by a Republican. I'm sought out for my involvement, particularly in areas having to do with the environment and higher education. On both sides of the aisle, I am committed to being a constructive, positive, pragmatic, solution-oriented member of Congress. That's what I've done, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
You can't really answer that question and entirely blame Republicans and then brag about how it's everyone's fault. I was just trying to understand. So there are almost 400 bills on Harry Reid's desk right now that passed the House that he won't even bring up to the floor for a vote. Sheila Jackson Lee, who is one of the colleagues of the incumbent, a Democratic congresswoman, has had more votes on bills in the House than every single Senate Republican combined. You can blame both parties, Republicans and Democrats. I'm not going to stand up here and say it's all the Democrats' fault. It's both parties' fault. They need to get their act together. People are frustrated. Folks who are here, they're not here because of some association one way or the other, and some group that's in the community. They're here because they care about their country. They care that Washington is not functioning.
The next question is for Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, proposals to replace Medicare with a voucher system and privatize, as you call it, Social Security, are another source of partisan division. Your website says you're against these ideas, but on the website you offer no alternatives. Why are they bad ideas, and what are the alternatives to those proposals?
Let me start with Social Security. The proposal to privatize Social Security, which despite what my opponent says, he endorsed in 2008 and endorsed just as recently as last Wednesday when we were in our Newsday endorsement interview, is a bad idea. And let me tell you why. Social Security is a program that is funded by the generation that's working. The generation that's working provides the funding for the benefits of the generation who's retired. If the generation that's working says, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore, we're going to take our withholding and we're going to put it in a private account for us. How do you pay the benefits of the generation that's working? That's the way the system was set up 70 years ago, 80 years ago, and that's the way it works. It is not a Ponzi scheme. We need to fix Social Security, but we need to be guided by two principles. One is that whatever we do should not increase our deficit, and the other is that we should not increase our debt. Now, if people pull their money out of the trust fund and put it into private accounts, that will increase our debt, because the only way we can cover the current Social Security obligations, if people aren't paying into the system, is by borrowing the money to pay it, and that will also increase our deficit because we'll have to service that debt. Those are just the facts. So privatizing Social Security simply will not work. There are lots of things that we should be looking at. We should be looking at the Social Security Disability Program, which needs reform. We should be looking at least in isolated ways of lifting the cap. Right now, the cap is at $117,000 of income. We have not taxed or increased the taxes for anyone in this country under $250,000 since 1993. Perhaps what we should look at, and I'm saying we should look at, okay, is we have a donut hole between 117 and 250, and then we have the Social Security tax kick in again at 250. But here's the thing. Social Security is very close to being fixed. When the trust fund runs out of money in 2033, we will have enough revenue to pay then 75% of the obligations. So do we have a problem? Yes. But is it a problem for the entirety of Social Security? No. We have to find 25% to fill that hole. And I hope coming together, without trying to point fingers and without trying to assess blame, such as what happened in 1983 when Social Security was fixed for 40-some years, we can do that. On Medicare, the voucher system that's proposed is destructive of Medicare. It would change Medicare as we know it. The estimate is that right now, senior citizens pay about 30% of their health care. And Medicare and other insurances that they have pay about 70%. If we move to the voucher system that has passed the House of Representatives several times, Republicans voting for it, Democrats voting against it, that number would go to about 60%. I simply cannot support that, and I
Time is
will.
up. Mr. Zeldin, 2 minutes.
So first off, I'll start with my message to all of the seniors who are here who were just now misled in person. I do not support privatizing your Social Security in any way, shape, or form. That's not, when we were at the Newsday endorsement, we weren't talking about privatizing Social Security for seniors. We're asking, what do we do about future generations? What do we do about someone who's in their teens right now or their 20s? I don't know what the perfect solution is, but we were having what I thought was a productive conversation there as far as different options. But what happens is, as soon as you leave the room of the productive conversation, people who want to get elected so badly will then come to a room like here and take what I said and say that I want to privatize your Social Security, which is not true. Probably will take the soundbite and try to cut that up for YouTube in a few minutes. As far as Medicare goes, Obamacare actually cuts Medicare by over $700 billion. Obamacare cuts Medicare Advantage by over $150 billion. So we have to be intelligent with the legislation that we pass to make sure that we are not making the challenges worse instead of better. I would actually argue that one of the most destructive things that have happened to either of those programs over the course of the last 10 years was Obamacare.
Couple things real quickly. No one, underline no one, is talking about privatizing Social Security for seniors. The discussion is, what do you do with people who are Lee's age? And what Lee said when we were in Newsday was that for someone his age, they should have the option of putting money in a private account. Now, that's privatization, folks. So I don't know what's worse. I don't know what's that he thinks privatization is a good idea, or he's running for Congress and he doesn't know what privatization is. So I think that and with respect to Medicare, what the Affordable Care Act does for Medicare is it actually expands opportunity. It prolonged the viability of the trust fund by 16 years. It provides free screenings, free wellness visits. And we've been talking about this $770 billion out of Medicare for 4 years. No procedure that Medicare covered pre-Medicare, pre-Affordable Care Act. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, I have 2 more questions. Even though we hit 8 o'clock, are you game? Okay. Next one is from Mr. Zeldin. What should the U.S. do about, you mentioned ISIS before, that's on my list, about the growing threat of ISIS in the Middle East? What can we do? What should we do?
The president gave a speech around September 10th, and that was his strategy for destroying ISIS. That followed a few weeks of bad PR after he said that he had no strategy, and then he made his announcement that was his strategy. His strategy is going to be effective in temporarily disrupting some of the operations of ISIS. You will be able to kill some of the bad guys. You will be able to take out some of the command and control. You would be able to take out some of their logistics. It has a 0% chance of destroying ISIS. I wish I could stand here and tell you that his strategy is going to work at destroying ISIS. When I was in Iraq in 2006, I had a chance to meet these Iraqi military and Iraqi law enforcement. It is a victory to get them to show up to work. If they have a precinct that is hundreds of feet from their house and not expecting any threat whatsoever that day, we can't even get them to show up there. So for them to be able to travel hundreds of miles away, and for them to kill this element that makes Al-Qaeda look like Boy Scouts, it's not going to work. They're not well trained. They're not fighting out of love for country and patriotism to uphold the Iraqi constitution, way of life, and rule of law. They care about their family. They want to get a paycheck, but they have no desire at all to go to Western Iraq and kill ISIS. In Syria, it concerns me that we're going to spend 6 months, a year, 2 years trying to train a small element whose fight isn't even with ISIS. And that once they go through their basic training, that all of a sudden these special forces Syrian rebels all of a sudden are going to be killing ISIS.
The question was, what should we do?
Well, for one, the president should appoint a general to be in charge on the ground. Someone like a David Petraeus, who was put in charge at the end of 2006, 2007. They were given the flexibility and resources to implement their vision to be able to turn the tide. The president in his speech said, this is going to be different than past wars in Iraq and Afghanistan because there will be no troops on the ground. In the same speech, a paragraph later, he says, tonight I'm announcing I'm sending 495 additional troops to Iraq. So those are boots on the ground. Now, I would like to know who they are, what their job is, who is in charge. But with all due respect, Commander-in-Chief Obama is not General Obama. And he needs to put someone in charge of the effort on the ground who knows these people, who have deployed several times, who could send a recommendation up to the Joint Chiefs and the Pentagon, can make a recommendation to the President,
Mr. Zeldin.
and that the President can change his strategy.
ISIS is a very serious threat, and it is a threat that could eventually reach our shores, and it's a threat that certainly imperils the safety and stability of the Middle East and our allies in the Middle East, so we have to deal with it. Now, the strategy that my opponent refers to as the President's strategy, it's not the President's strategy, it's the administration strategy, which includes the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is one that would keep our role limited to training and arming the Iraqi army, which we've already spent $30 billion training and equipping the moderate Syrian opposition and supporting the Peshmerga, and all of that would be supported by airstrikes from us and other nations in the coalition. I think we need to give that strategy an opportunity to work, and I'll tell you why. The reason I say that is that this cannot become another Middle East conflict between the Christian West and the Muslim Middle East. Let us remember that when we went to Iraq in 2003, we went there to depose a dictator. We did, in about 5 minutes, and defeated his army in a couple of weeks. And then found ourselves there for 11 years, fighting enemies that did not exist when we invaded. There was no ISIS, there was no Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, there were no Sunni militias, there were no, or Sunni insurgency, there were no Shia death squads and Shia militias. So what's to say that we defeat ISIS and all of a sudden there's another group not coming up? General Dempsey was asked, how can we defeat ISIS in 90 days? And he said it can't be done. He said it can't be done militarily. Those are just the facts. It has to come from the governments of the Middle East, and it has to come from Sunnis being made to feel a part of the governments of the Middle East, as opposed to disenfranchised and repressed.
Time is up.
Our military has been stretched very thin over the course of the last 13 years. A lot of missed Christmases and birthdays, anniversaries. It's been a strain on our military. And I think that there is a strong public sentiment that fills just about every single person in this room we're not looking for a fight with ISIS. And sometimes a conflict finds you. And regardless of however we got to where we are right now, I'm not saying it because I'm rooting against the the president on this. I wish his strategy would work. I want his strategy to work. I'm just saying that one of the reasons why it took us 5 minutes, or it took us 2 weeks to take over the country, was because they laid down their arms. So these people who are supposed to defeat ISIS on the ground don't care. So we need to change the strategy.
Time. The last question for Mr. Bishop, somewhat more local note. You've spoken about saving 1,000 jobs at B&L and securing more than $1 billion in direct federal investment to Long Island in science and technology fields at B&L and Stony Brook. Now, that's wonderful, but it doesn't do a lot for thousands of college graduates from middle-class families like my own who find few employment opportunities that aren't minimum wage, retail, or service jobs. We have a potential regional economic engine in Calverton that is obviously beyond the town's ability or resources to develop. Speaking of the former Grumman site at the Press Park. If for no other reason than lack of funds for infrastructure, such as sewer, roads, drainage, etc. What role can and should the federal government have to help develop the Calverton Enterprise Park as a high-tech industrial park where young adults can be gainfully employed at livable wages?
Let me start with the wastewater infrastructure, because this is an issue that I've worked on a lot. And it's a serious problem for Long Island in terms of economic development. Communities all over Long Island are thwarted in their desire to grow economically because they don't have any way of dealing with the waste that such growth would create. One of the things that I've been working on is something called the State Revolving Fund. That's how we now fund sewage treatment projects and wastewater infrastructure projects in the country. We used to spend 68 cents on the dollar, federal government. That went away in the Reagan administration. We now have the State Revolving Fund. I've been one of the leaders in the effort to get that fund reauthorized. In fact, the bill that I referred to earlier that I helped write this past year does in fact reauthorize that fund. It increases the authorization of monies that can be spent from that. And it also creates a new financing mechanism, something that I push very hard for, called WIFIA, which is the ability of municipalities to deal directly with the Treasury and borrow money from the Treasury at very favorable rates so that they can put in place the kinds of infrastructure that we need. We have a $300 billion wastewater infrastructure backlog in this country that we're simply not addressing. And if we do address it, it's a win for everybody. It's a win for the environment, it's a win for economic development, and it's a win for the jobs we would create by the people who are building the infrastructure that we need. So that's a big piece of it, and one of the reasons I've been working so hard on it is because it's so crucial to Long Island, and we've made some real progress, and these funds, both the state revolving funds and the WIFIA funds, are going to soon become available to municipalities so that they can borrow. We do need to invest in high tech. Another reason that I've been so focused on STEM, science, technology, and engineering and math education, is so that we have the educated workforce that's necessary to work in the companies that are on the cutting edge. It's why I've been so supportive of Brookhaven Lab. It's why I helped bring a couple of $100 million to Brookhaven Lab to build NSLS2, which employed thousands of construction workers and employs hundreds of scientists doing a very important work that then ripples through the economy, and it's the same with Stony Brook. The Stony Brook Incubator. There's one in Calverton, there's one in Stony Brook. That's creating jobs and creating businesses that will ripple through the economy. The federal government's role, in my opinion, is to provide the infrastructure support and to provide the ability to train the young men and women who can work in these jobs, and that's why I've been so focused on access to higher education and so focused on supporting the educational institutions of Long Island.
So the question was with regards to EPCAL. So Sean Walter, who's the Riverhead Town Supervisor, who I see him here in the back, we have had the opportunity to work together over the course of the years. He has his map for the property and a vision, working with folks at a local level, trying to hear feedback from local town residents to try to implement the right vision to improve that property. When I was up in Albany working with Senator Ken Lavelle, the state senator here in the area, we were able to secure millions of dollars to help Riverhead Town in order to be able to move forward with their vision for EPCAL. The federal government historically has an integral role with regards to EPCAL. There are certain burdens that are placed on Riverhead Town right now because of the federal government. So I think just it is a natural fit that if one of the problems we all complain about, unfunded mandates, rules that come from higher levels of government, if the federal government wants to have their finger in so much with regards to development of EPCAL, they should not just make it more challenging, they should help them with the development. There is an opportunity to create more jobs. You need to improve the infrastructure around EPCAL. I don't think that a ski slope is the right answer. Going back a few years, people have been creative in the past, but I think that the town supervisor he has a vision that I'd like to help work with him and the town board and the town residents to develop. With regards to the struggles of people who are trying to start their own family here, they can't. It's just the high cost of living. Any opportunity you can find to reduce energy costs, healthcare costs, taxes, the ability to purchase your first home. We need to not only create, it's not just public sector jobs, the incumbents talk a lot about public sector jobs. We need to create good paying private sector jobs. That's the key, and we're losing too many of them.
With respect to EPCAL, I was the guy that got the money for the rail spur that connects EPCAL with the main line of the Long Island Railroad. A big help to many of the companies in EPCAL because they can now get their products to market quicker, more efficiently, and in a fashion that saves fuel. I worked with the previous town board on that and with the current town board on that. I think Sean will also tell you that I stand ready and have to assist the town of Riverhead in any way that they ask. I was able to get the money for the new street sidewalks and street lighting in downtown Riverhead. That was something that I was able to get in the transportation bill a few years ago. And I stand ready if there are issues at EPCAL, which the federal government is in the way. I would encourage Sean to bring those to my attention, and I will do the best I can to move them out of the way. Thank you.
Now it's time for closing statements, and the coin toss at the beginning of the evening. Mr. Bishop, you go first. You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
That'll take it. Good news, right? We have a real contrast here, a real choice people have. Lee gave you his choice, his definition of the choice earlier, said between a guy that's a doer and a guy that's a backbencher, then proceeded to say that it is the Obama, Pelosi, Bishop agenda that's ruining this country. You can't both drive an agenda and be a backbencher, folks. It doesn't work. What I am is a good, hardworking, solid, pragmatic, solution-oriented member of Congress. You will not find a soul in Congress who will describe me any other way. I've worked that way for 12 years, and if I'm so fortunate as to be reelected, I will continue to work that way. Now, Congress is broken. Congress is dysfunctional. Congress is paralyzed. And what I hear my opponents say, it's a good line, you want to change Congress, you got to change the way that the people that you send there. Guess what? He's right about that. But he's picking on the wrong guy. Because I am not part of the problem. I am part of the solution. May I continue? And I have been, and all of my colleagues in Washington will tell you that. I have worked tirelessly for 12 years. I know every inch of this district. Our constituent service operation has satisfactorily closed 17,000 cases. Now that's hard work, that's dedication, and that's being committed to what I think is the most important part of this job, which is being focused on the people that I represent and solving problems one at a time. We've been doing it for 12 years, we've been doing it to the tune of over 17,000 cases, and we do it extremely well. And I'm very proud of that, and I will also tell you that one of the reasons we are able to do it as well as we do is because I have a very experienced staff. My immigration caseworker has been with us for 12 years. My Veterans Affairs caseworker has been with us for 11 years. My Medicare, Social Security, housing caseworker has been with us for 8 years. That experience is irreplaceable, and their ability to do what they do is rooted in the relationships that they've developed and the experience that they've developed. So I'm very proud of that, and that, I will tell you, is the most impactful work that a member of Congress can do, and if I'm re-elected, that's what I'm going to stay focused on. I'm also going to stay focused on what is good for Long Island, and that's why I've been as focused as I have been on higher education. That's why I've been as focused as I have been on the environment, and why I've been as focused as I have been on veterans issues. We have more veterans in Suffolk County, I believe, than any other county in the country, with the possible exception of Orange County, California. And I have worked tirelessly with respect to veterans. I have worked tirelessly with respect to the environment, and I have worked tirelessly with respect to higher education with results. And I think what you want is a member of Congress who stays grounded in his district, stays grounded in what the work is really all about, which is individual people and solving problems for individual people, and we've done that. And then taking a larger view of what works for the region. We've done that. So I will ask for your vote. I won't ask all of you for your vote, but I will ask for your vote, and I will...
Vote you out.
May I continue? You know what? It's very hard to stay concentrating when you're interrupted like that. So I will stop there. Lee and I are going to be in the same room several thousand times between now and Election Day. You'll have other opportunities to come, hear us talk. I hope not be disruptive. I ask for your vote on Election Day because I believe that I have done the job. I believe that I've done it as well as it can be done. And I believe that if I continue to have the opportunity to serve you, I will continue to serve in the fashion that I have for the last 12 years. Thank you very much.
There were certain things during this debate that obviously we disagreed with each other, agreed with each other on. We agree that we can't change Washington unless we change who we send there. A little disagreement as to who should get replaced. When I was referring to problem solver versus backbencher, I was talking about being in office for 12 years, introducing 4 bills that have been passed and signed into law, renaming post offices. We have bills as well that got passed and signed into law with regards to our veterans. We just renamed a bridge for Michael Esposito. It's a first KIA in Afghanistan, a Brentwood native. But we not only try to honor the legacy of someone like Michael in memorializing that bridge, we also cut taxes, cut fees, consolidated licenses, protected our military families from protests and military burials. There were dozens, 4 dozen bills that we got passed and signed into law. Problem solver versus backbencher. Now, a few hours ago, my opponent on social media posted encouraging folks to come out here to come see his concrete plans for the middle class. It was actually, if you really had concrete plans, he was spoon-fed that it was a great question about the very last question we were asked, about Denise's own children. When that opportunity presents him, there's never substance behind it. Yes, we need to have higher education opportunities. But after you get that degree and you're saddled with student loan debt, and you can't afford to buy your first home and pay your mortgage and pay your credit card bills, you can't afford to put oil in your tank, your health care is starting to become cost prohibitive, your energy costs are skyrocketing, your property taxes, 70% of which go to school taxes. Everything adds up, you reach your breaking point, and you decide to start your life somewhere else. So everyone here in this room has stories of our families going to North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, because they can't afford to survive here. And seniors here in this room who have to choose between prescription medication or oil in their tank. Fighting for the middle class isn't just about what kind of money that we can come up with in Washington. It's the policies that are killing us. It's the fact that you are having trouble building here on Long Island because it can take you years to get a project off the ground. The fact that you could go to your local town council and they are requiring you to get $2 million for a park that is 2 miles away in order to get a rezoning on something you should be able to do as of right. Or if you want to file an Article 78, an individual can stop a construction project in its tracks. In other places, you want to invest in the community, it's easy, but not here. And every level of government has a responsibility to get it done. The federal government, the policies are driving jobs out of this country. Driving dollars out of this country. The policies of Congress have been outsourcing jobs out of the United States of America. Obamacare has been outsourcing jobs off of Long Island. You know that the way that we were saving money under Obamacare, through the way there was a cut to Medicare? We changed the competitive bidding process. So for those of you who might be getting Medicare services, that person in your neighborhood who you're used to calling up to provide your service, now you're calling someone out of state. It's the breaking point. Individuals are leaving because they've reached a breaking point. And we all have different breaking points. But I have proven with my record up in Albany that I fight for middle income people and deliver results every single day that I'm on the job. I come back here and I'm able to talk about how in the last 4 years, I personally led the fight to repeal the MTA payroll tax for 80% of employers. 34,000 employers in Suffolk County who used to pay it, don't have to pay it anymore. I eliminated the saltwater fishing license fee. I secured record increases to school aid. Middle-income Long Islanders paying their lowest level in 60 years. We cannot keep re-electing the same congressman over and over and over again and ever expect a different result. This is our opportunity on Tuesday, November 4th. If you're happy with Congress, if you're happy with the status quo, if you're happy with the Obama-Pelosi-Bishop agenda, or the Obama-Pelosi agenda that Bishop supports 110%, that's one thing. I'm asking for your vote for a new direction for America, a new direction for us. We could be better represented in Congress. I'm asking for your support on November 4th.